fellow focus. Thank you, Ralph.
No problem.
Um, Blessed to have two fellow focus group leaders here with us tonight, Kate Melvin and Walt Sterneman. Are you just the critique group, or you do multiple groups, Kate?
Portrait group.
Okay, and also Walt, who's the one of the long-time leaders of our lawn group. So I'd like to thank both of them. Tonight, we're going to talk about different ways to organize your files. We're going to talk about some software packages some of you are probably familiar with. And then Walt's going to give a little presentation on how you can organize your files without having to pay for any software if you don't want to. So, is there any questions before we get started? Hearing none, seeing none. Kate, you have the floor.
I need to revise my answer. I do not lead the portrait group, but this is my inaugural meeting for Circles of Learning. And so that's all I was thinking. I do participate in other groups occasionally. So anyway, I don't want to take any credit for Kip's work. That's a great work. That's a great group if you guys ever get a chance to attend. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. So Jack assigned me introduction on how to import your Lightroom files. And so this is it's not a step-by-step instructional guide. It's really an overview, and I focus a lot on the importance of organizing your pictures before you start organizing them in Lightroom. So coming up with an organization method. And my workflow is to import everything into Lightroom and then do the heavy lifting and the edits in Photoshop. So I put everything in Lightroom, I organize it, and then I do all my edits in Photoshop, and then I go back into Lightroom and export and print out of there. So I use a MacBook. I use Lightroom Classic. If anybody uses a Windows computer, when I say Finder, that's just the Windows Explorer file system. So that's just how I access the files. You can, of course, find instructions online, and I use the Adobe site quite a bit to find instructions. And then our friend Google, YouTube has videos, but also I've included my contact information, and I'm happy to do my best to try and help if you're setting up a catalog. And if you need to discuss how you organize, I've done a lot of different ways of organizing, and it's evolved over the years. So I have some tips and tricks there too. Okay. All right. I do a lot of composites, and I have a lot of photos. And when I started doing compositing, I would think, hey, I had that bluebird photo, and then I would try and find the bluebird photo, and then I couldn't find the bluebird photo or whatever it was. And then I would get mad, and then I never did my composite. So during COVID, I spent a lot of time reorganizing my files and coming up with a filing system that worked for me. And so that's why I'm saying you really need to think about what do you want your organization to be, because the goal is to be able to find your photos quickly, or as quickly as possible, or just find it, at all. So the organization is essentials. We start off with a new Lightroom catalog. It's very easy. File, new catalog. You put your file name in here. It says, for this one, it says Lightroom sample catalog. It automatically will default to your Lightroom folder on your desktop or on your hard drive. You can change where it goes. And you can have multiple catalogs. I have everything in one catalog. That works for me. There are use cases to have things in multiple catalogs. So it's not a hard and fast rule that you have to have everything in one catalog. That's just what I do. It is a very big catalog. So once you add your file name and you hit OK, your Lightroom will shut down. It's a little alarming, actually. It'll just shut off, but then it restarts. and you're in a new catalog. You start from scratch there. If you look into your Finder, you'll see all these different kinds of files. There's a bunch of them when you have your catalogs and your catalog backups. The two main ones, you'll never ever probably have to access these, but just so you know what they are, this is to preview your images. This the one that says previews, obviously, and then the LRCAT, that's your Lightroom catalog, and then other stuff that helps make the magic happen, I guess, behind the scenes. One of the things that's really important to understand when you're using a Lightroom catalog is that these are files that connect to your photos. This is a system that will say, go out to this place on a hard drive or wherever your photos are stored and reference that photo. So later we're going to talk about backing up your Lightroom catalog. Just keep in mind when you're backing up that Lightroom catalog, it's just your Lightroom changes. It's not backing up your photos. So it's kind of like, I think of it like a filing cabinet. You know, you've got all your different files. You might have your organizational system might be red tabs and yellow tabs and all of this, but that's not really where your files are. Your pictures aren't in those file folders.
I used to think about the catalog, and I'll tell you, this will tell you how old I am, like the card files at the library.
Mm-hmm.
The books are all somewhere on the shelves, but without the card file to look stuff up, you just got to look through a lot of books.
That's a great example. I don't know if my kids would know what a card catalog is.
Well, I figured I was safe with this age group.
And the fact that they call it catalog, that probably is a good hint. That's where that came from.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Kate, can I ask you where do you keep your files with your with the actual photos on them? Do you have a just massive space on your computer that you're working on? Do you have a network storage device? Are you storing them in the cloud?
I store all of my photos. Now, Walt, you can stop me if I start taking away your thunder, okay? But I store all of my photos on an external hard drive. And then I back up that external hard drive and I keep one copy at the bank. Okay, I've lost a lot of photos, so this is where my paranoia comes from. And then I start a new hard drive every 1 to 2 years. So
I am going to touch on that, Kate, but it's always interesting to hear what other people are doing as well.
Mm-hmm.
When I import my photos, I usually use a memory card. I don't reuse that memory card until I'm all the way finished with the photos. And I store a backup or I store my photos on SmugMug, my final JPEGs. So I've got my JPEGs in 2 hard drives and in SmugMug. I'm really paranoid. I don't know.
It's good to back up.
Yeah.
All right. So then, like when you walk around with your laptop, you don't carry your external hard drive around with you. So do you grab a small subset of things if you are going somewhere and you want to show photos or work with photos somewhere else?
I do. If I have photos, I want a small amount of photos, I will put them on a folder on my hard drive and just take that.
Mhm.
When I travel, I take one of my hard drives with me. It's called Lacy Rugged. It's kind of got like an orange bumper around it. I think just because of the name, I feel like it's pretty safe, and I keep it in a case if I travel anywhere, you know, very far.
Those Lacy drives are supposed to be really good.
But I've had good luck with them. I've probably the last 2 years I've had the Lacy, and I feel really comfortable traveling with the ones with the bumpers around them. It's probably just a sales gimmick, but I don't know.
Hey, Kate, how
Yes.
big is the hard drive? How big is the hard drive? What is the capacity?
The hard drive I have And it's because of my composite asset catalog. So my composite asset catalog, I moved from hard drive to hard drive, and it's huge. And so I think it's probably five big ones. Is that gigabyte? Megabyte?
Terabyte's big.
Terabyte.
Terabyte.
Yeah.
Can't be 5 gigabyte, 5 terabyte.
Mhm.
Costco just had, as a Black Friday special, 14 terabyte drives for $150.
Yeah.
Those hard drives are always on my Christmas list. If you guys see my hubby around, he can't remember that, but they're always on my Christmas list because they can get pretty pricey. But 150, that's great. 14.
Or less, right at $10 per terabyte, which is almost unheard of.
They're not super fast, but if you have a good way to transfer the stuff, yeah, those are great.
That's a Blatter drive. That's correct. It's not an SSD drive.
The what?
That's a Blatter drive, not SSD.
Right, it's a spinning drive. It's not a SSD.
Right.
You're not going to get a 14 terabyte SSD for $150.
Nope.
No, that's why I said that.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm trying to find one of the hard drives they have.
Well, let's let Kate go on. Kate?
Yeah, please do.
So there's several ways to import your photos. So you can attach your iPhone to your computer and import your photos into Lightroom that way. That's on my list of things to do because I have a bazillion iPhone photos that I really need to back up and organize in some way. I've tried organizing them on the Apple products. It doesn't work for me. You can do a tethered capture right into Lightroom. That's good for people that want to, you attach your camera to your computer and you bring up Lightroom and the photos will come up. You can look at them as you're taking the pictures. You can just click and drag from your Finder into the library window and it'll bring up the import files. You can import from your desktop, a hard drive, but what I always do is I have my memory card or my QXD card and I will import that in. We'll have a little converter put inside of my computer and then I click import and then these are the screens that come up. So you're in when you first open Lightroom, you're in the library function. Plug in your memory card and then you hit the import button in library and then the import dialog boxes come up. And this is in Lightroom, this is all in one screen, but I tried to blow it up so we could read it. At the very top, once you plug in your memory card and you want to import it, you've got a couple of options up there. And the one that I use is copy as DNG. That's a digital negative. Dork nerd geek, that's what my kids call it. It's a digital negative something.
That's accurate.
I can't remember what the G is, but it is a universal format. I think Adobe probably came up with it.
It's an Adobe format.
Adobe, okay.
Yeah,
It's
actually.
It's universal. That means that you can put it into many different applications and the DNG will work. So for the most part, there's always exceptions. So it's very compatible with different programs. And also I think the theory behind it is that if Canon or Nikon or your different types of cameras, each camera has a different file type when you take a raw photo. So I use Nikon. My file extension is .nef. I think Canon is .cr2. So I import my files in on my memory card. I hit copy as DNG and it converts my files, my raw files, into this kind of universal format. And I would say I almost always use that, except if I'm shooting sports photos and I have 1,000 pictures to import and the kids wanted them as soon as they took the shot, I just copy them over and because I have to work so quickly. It does take a little extra time to convert them.
Are the DNG files approximately the same size as the raw files, or smaller or larger, or what?
I would assume it's a 1-for-1, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
D&G is based on TIFF, so it's not completely proprietary, but it's not exactly raw either, because raw is a direct reading of a pixel sensor in terms of RGB values, and TIFF is not necessarily oriented that way.
Are the DNG files as big as TIFF files?
They can be.
Well, I don't want to do that.
Yeah. TIFF is not the economy size,
TIFF is what your publisher wants.
Maybe.
You're gonna have to go to Costco, Jack, and get that big one.
I already got it. It's sitting there.
Yeah.
It's sitting there on my. It's backing up my NAS right now. It's running a 7 terabyte backup.
Right. So there are other options here. You can just copy or move. If you're the kind that wants to clean off that memory card, I think you can just move it from one to another. When I move my composite assets, I copy my composite assets, so I always have a copy on one of my old hard drives. So that's one reason to copy those over. Let's see. And so I did just do some selections on here. I always eject my card after import because I had dogs and kids, and somebody's always knocking into my computer, and then things get unplugged. And then my MacBook's mad at me. So you do always have to include the subfolders, because for some reason, if I don't, then nothing will pop up over here, and it'll just say include subfolders, and you click on it, and then your pictures come up. On the left here is the source. So I've got the Nikon D500 here is that's my memory card. And then I've got the Lacey. And then this is just your desktop or your hard drive. So of course, pick whichever source where your files are. And then you can determine if you want to eject that or your source files after they're imported or not. I always click on new photos. There's different options on here for sorting. But basically you can pick 1 or 10 or all photos here. So you can do a selection. So one of the things, like when I'm doing the sports photos, I'll go through very, very quickly and pick out series of photos. So I don't have to import everything in. So that's on the left-hand side in the import file in the very top.
The new photos, where the new photos are at, where it says 191 photos, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those thumbnails down there, are those the ones that are on the source?
Yes.
And then you select what out of that you want to import, right? Or
yes.
Copy or move. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. The import screen is has 3 columns. It's got the source, and then the photos, and then the destination, which is destination files. And then at the very top is where you can tell it how you want to move it. If you want to just copy or move, or
okay.
Yeah.
Are the thumbnails actually on the source? Or are they just rendered by the processor while you open it?
Well, the Lightroom doesn't contain your photos, so it's just reading the photo and doing a preview based on the source.
Okay. Yeah, I would assume that it doesn't write anything to the source media, but it's just a rendering that once it goes away, it goes away. But it does keep track that it once created the thumbnail for this file, and here it is.
Mm-hmm.
Adobe Bridge will store it as a temporary file on your computer that you can purge every now and then if you need to be.
Right.
So on the right-hand side of the import panel, there's several, that's one long column there. I put the settings that I use most of the time here. And again, this is, if you have already thought through and determined how you want to start organizing your files, it makes this much easier. I know when I first started using Lightroom, I was on Elements, I started using Lightroom. I probably imported everything differently for 2 years, and then it was a mess. But it's okay now. I can find stuff.
I can imagine. Oh, feel the pain.
Mhm. At the very top, you can tell it where you want it to go to. So you want it, if you have 3 hard drives plugged in, you can tell it which hard drive you want it to go to, or your desktop. So there's this, where do you want the files to go to? And then the next box down, because it's a column, is the file handling. And so the previews, the pictures that are in this middle panel, how detailed do you want those previews to be? Versus if they're bigger, it's going to slow things down. Don, this build smart previews option is very interesting. If you don't want to carry around your hard drive and you want to work on your photos, you can build smart previews. It will slow things down, but even though my hard drive's not connected, I can still make Lightroom adjustments to it. Now the file's not there, but Lightroom will remember if you have smart previews that you've increased the exposure, major adjustments in Lightroom.
Oh, so it's like a lower quality image that you can edit, and then it applies them to the real thing when the file is there?
Well, the image isn't there, but Lightroom remembers that it's a picture of the bluebird and kind of what you've already done to it. You can't print it from there, in other words, but you can continue making your Lightroom adjustments in there, and it will remember.
Kate, on the right-hand side, it says destination. Remember, you're going to get to this. Organized by date. What are the other options for organizing?
I'm actually not sure because I'm on my Windows computer.
It has a down arrow there, like
there are all kinds of different things. These are just the settings that I normally use, but you definitely should go in there and look at it before you decide how you want to organize. This is just what works for me. The by date.
I don't organize my photos by date. I would just totally lost if I do that. So I organize them by topic or purpose or so on.
Okay, well, there's a way to do that too. So, but under file handling, if you're even more paranoid than me, you can make a second copy on import. I don't do that, but it's an option there for you. And then I don't use collections in Lightroom, but that's another way you can add some organization to your files. The next section down, the apply during import. I don't know all the settings on the drop downs, but I think you could probably apply some presets here if you wanted. Yeah. I use it to put my copyright data in there and my contact information, because hope springs eternal that somebody's going to call me and offer me $1 million for that photo that they saw on Facebook. So I don't think anybody will actually ever steal my photos, but I do always hope that somebody will want to buy it from me. So I like to stick that in there. The next section down on that right-hand column is the file renaming. I don't rename my files, but if you do the drop down on this, there's all kinds of different ways that you can rename the files, and there's the custom settings. So mine has custom settings, but it's really just the file name off of the memory card, because I like to have the number, the picture number on there. I'm not sure the sequence number is like 6571 or whatever. And you can put this into a subfolder in Lightroom. I don't do that. I do organize by date, like Juliet said. There's different date formats you can use, and this this is the one that I prefer, is starting with the year. And then if you wanted to put it on your hard drive, you could select something in here. And then this is my, this is how I organize Juliet. So I've got all my composite stuff in file 1. And as you click down into it, if I click into my family photos, you'll see where those date folders start coming in. So I've got this, the date folders, and I could, this is a family reunion. So, if I imported this in, when I imported this in, I got a new folder, 231001. I imported it in, and then I renamed it in the library function. So you can just right click rename. And so I will right click rename and then give it some sort of description so I remember what it is. And I learned that the hard way too.
Yeah.
I have 100 million. I have 100 million files that just have a date on them, and that is unhelpful.
Right.
So,
Able to rename it based upon the folder name?
say that again.
Are you able to rename based upon the folder name? Like whatever folder, say you rename your folder that's got all the photos, say a ball game, and you had the date and you had the ball game name or whatever. And then when you rename those would be sequential based upon the folder's name.
Yes. Yes. That's why I like the date, because they're in order.
Yeah.
And so other, you know, on all of our groups, you might have a macro folder, and under that macro folder, you might have bubbles and snowflakes and flowers. You can get really detailed in your filing system. There's a lot of benefits to that. There's some drawbacks too. You can get too detailed, but this is what works for me. Or you can have a folder for each group, BPC group that you're in. There's a ton of ways to organize your pictures, and that's why I think if I had to do it over again, I would have spent a lot more time trying to figure out how I wanted to organize. If I had known what an obsession this was going to be when I first started, I would have put a lot more time into being organized.
We learn a lot by suffering.
Yeah. Okay, so you've imported everything into Lightroom. You click the import button. This other than being really organized, this is the second most important thing about Lightroom imports is you are now in a committed relationship with Lightroom. And if you start messing around with your files outside of Lightroom, you're going to have problems.
Right.
So
To say you're going to have problems is minimizing it a little bit.
yes.
Yeah.
You will freak out. You will think that your photos are disappeared. You're never going to see them again. So Lightroom really doesn't like it if you move your folders around, you rename your folders or rename your pictures or anything outside of Lightroom. Nothing will happen to your pictures, but what happens is you potentially could lose your work and your Lightroom work. And so when you rename something or move something outside of Lightroom, you're breaking that connection, that pointer from Lightroom to where the picture actually is.
Does Lightroom save an XMP file for the edits along with the original file?
Sometimes in a different place.
Yeah, that's the good news and the bad news.
Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't sound.
Oh yeah.
That sounds
the
like a
XMP
recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
The XMP files they're just XML files, so you
Yeah.
can read them with a text editor. But like any good XML thing, if you screw up somewhere, it's kind of toast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the
Yeah,
good,
you really do not want to do that. If you renamed it in the catalog, your best option is when you open the catalog and it cannot find it, you say
Right.
locate and to go to the new location with the new name.
Sometimes it does.
Yeah.
Not always.
Well,
right,
and the frustrating thing is if you change the folder name, you would think that it would be smart enough if I relocated a file within that folder it would know for the rest of them. But no, you have to do them one by one.
Is that
Truly.
for both Windows and Mac?
Yes.
I assume I use a Mac, so
Because it used to be,
I use Windows and it generally gets anything close to that exclamation when I locate it.
okay. That's good. It's good that there's improvements.
I think that's changed over time, but you can't rely on it is the problem.
Yeah, yeah. That's,
So don't do it.
I won't. Some of us have a dear friend who's recently left town that I spent a whole weekend once trying to help him find stuff when he started
wow.
copying stuff outside of Lightroom from drive to drive.
oh man,
Oh no.
Anyway,
the pain,
that's,
the
pro-
pain.
that's probably enough horror stories, Kate.
I think we've all been traumatized by this. The individual pictures will have this exclamation mark, means you need to locate it. The files will have a question mark on them. And once you start messing with the files, it really starts getting tricky, I think. Sometimes in Lightroom, like if you're working in Photoshop and you save your photo on your hard drive, Lightroom won't recognize it. So if you right click on that Lightroom folder in the library module and you can hit synchronize, it'll load those Photoshop files for you. It'll reload anything that you've saved in there. So if I've downloaded some assets into a folder, let's say I've downloaded some Adobe stock into my composite asset folder, I can right click on my composite asset folder, hit synchronize, and then all of those photos will start coming up. So I can play with them in there. Speaking of the XMP files, there is an option to merge catalogs. So if you want different catalogs for different things and then you decide you hate it, make sure you use the merge catalog function, which moves those XMP files.
Yeah.
Don't re-import. If you re-import, the XMP files do not come with them.
All right.
I learned that the hard way. That was a disaster. I think I broke everything in Lightroom.
Yeah, it sounds like you have suffered much.
I don't use Lightroom
anymore. I don't use Lightroom anymore, but as I recall, there's a selection that allows you to store the XMP files with the raw file.
Yeah, and that's why
is much more safe than the
That
other.
doesn't automatically happen,
Central catalog file.
I'm not sure. I think all of mine are in the same spot.
It's better, yeah, because that also, as you grow your catalog, can become a very large and unwieldy file. And so it's much better if you have them broken off and stored as they call it a sidecar file, and stored as a sidecar file with the actual raw file.
I might need to explore that because my catalog is getting too big.
So the XMP files, regardless of how they're located, is a sidecar file. It just contains metadata about a specific file. So which is why it's file specific by drive or device down to the folder level, down to the file level, which is why when you move them, Lightroom just goes ape, goes nuts. So,
but it's much easier to find them if you have them stored with the file rather than.
Oh yeah, I can't imagine. Oh, that would be a horrible form of hunting and pecking.
Kate, what is your overall opinion if you're trying to find a file? You remember, the picture, and you're not sure where it is. You're looking for it. You're frustrated. You're looking. Does Lightroom help you to find it or not?
In my experience, I would say no, because I don't use the collections. I don't use keywords. You can't just type in bird and all the birds come up. If you on your not that I know of, on my iPhone, I can type in, you know, pictures of my daughter and all the pictures that I have of her pop up. They do have face detection in Lightroom. I haven't used that yet. But if you use all of those things, it's probably much, much easier.
Common sense
the more-
file naming would help you find things if all else fails.
Yeah, let's not get into file naming. That's after Kate.
Oh yeah, it's these are these are hard things to learn to figure out. But-
Kate, you're at 45 minutes.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's not just me talking, but yes, I hear you. Okay. So, one thing that I do to save space on my hard drives and help stay organized is I have these four subfolders. So I've imported in, and then I put subfolder 1 capture. That's where all of my initial files go. So I just do a Command A, I drag everything in here. Everything else is, nothing else has been saved in the other folders. The second, I think capture, master, and output are pretty standard. I've got a selects in there. So I'll go through quickly and select all the photos that I think are going to be, that I want to review a little closer, and I'll stick them in that selects folder. Those are all my DNG files here. So I've got all of my files in the first one. I pulled out this one because I liked it. On number 3 on master, those are my Photoshop files. So I right click here, go to Photoshop, and when I save in Photoshop, I stick it in this master folder. And then you can export and save your JPEGs in the output folder. Now, a lot of basketball files. And so I, in some cases, will delete the capture folder off my hard drive to save space. So just a little.
Your captures your original files, right?
Yes, but I will pull the ones that I want.
Oh, you may.
Yeah.
Part of your workflow is to duplicate the masters into the other subfolders.
I do. I do. These are the original ones on capture that came off my memory card.
Right.
Put it in this subfolder, and then I'll go through, and there's a way to select favorites. And so I go through and I do a selection, and I pull those over, so I don't have duplicates.
Okay.
Lightroom doesn't like duplicates either.
Okay, that's fine.
Yep.
No, I did not realize your selects, DNGs, and those are actually copies from your capture.
Yes.
Okay, never mind. Thank you.
Yeah. And then.
And then, do you have something automated that creates these 4 subfolders under every folder that you create, or do you manually generate each of these each time?
I manually do it. It doesn't. Okay. If you find a way to automate it, I would love that. It feels like there should be a macro, but I don't know.
There should be there, but there may not be. I don't know.
When I do my exports, I do 2 resolutions of every photo. One's a low resolution, in case for posting on social media is easier to load, and then a high resolution for printing. That's just a little picadillo, I think. Back up your catalog. This person should be wearing a life vest. That's what your backups are. You can set it up to back up every time Lightroom exits. And so here's the, you go into your catalog settings, and under general, select every time Lightroom backs up, or back up every time Lightroom exits. And I, on the Mac, save my Lightroom catalogs, and it'll save a new one every time you back up. I save them on my desktop, and I have my desktop, backs up to my iCloud. So I've got a backup on my iCloud, a backup on my desktop, and then Time Machine. So it's kind of a double. This is my shameless plug for the critique group. Next meeting is January 24th. It's a hybrid. It's at the Monroe County Library or in Zoom. We have a great Facebook group. If you can't make the meetings, you can always post in the Facebook group. And our meetings are the 4th Wednesday of every month from 7 to 9. And then I added my contact information. I'm always happy to go through or even hop on Zoom and help troubleshoot anything or brainstorm organization styles or tell you some more horror stories of bad things that I did because I click a lot. I click a lot of stuff. So that is the end. Is there any,
Yeah.
are there any questions? I know I talked a lot.
You covered a lot of information. Can you go back to that where you back up stuff thing a minute? There, stop. All I can say is the few people I have ever had that I've helped, everybody learns eventually to click every time Lightroom exits with the backup.
Oh yeah.
That's
I
my
set it up that way, and I've had to restore from that backup before.
Yeah.
So it's corrupted. I had a lot of MacBook problems. It was hardware related for a couple of years.
Okay, are there any more questions for Kate on Lightroom and how to import a little on workflow, catalogs, etc.?
So it would seem that once you start down, you go to the dark side of the forest using Lightroom, you're stuck with it. It's really hard to get out of it.
Tried to use Lightroom before, and I always have to give up. I'm used to using Adobe Bridge and Photoshop, and this stuff all seems way too daunting to me. Now, I know a lot of people, photographers I admire on YouTube channels and stuff, use Lightroom all the time, so it must be great. But for me, I guess I don't get this. This seems way overcomplicated. Bridge is a much simpler system.
Yeah, one of the things that Kate did not delve into tonight because it wasn't part of the topic, some of the editing into Lightroom is pretty smooth. And a lot of people use it. A lot of people use it because it's the analogy is a piece of film and the way it's laid out. A lot of people like the film analogy develop, et cetera.
Like a light table, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we didn't talk, and Kate did not talk about that because we weren't going to talk about that.
And I moved from Elements to Lightroom as a kind of a natural progression. I didn't start off in Photoshop. So I did all of my edits in Lightroom for years. Only when I started doing the compositing did I have to get into Photoshop quite a bit. So most of my pictures are under this selects, and I do my editing in here in Lightroom.
Okay.
So Teddy, does Bridge as a Adobe product work pretty seamlessly with Lightroom, or don't you use it that way?
I guess you can do a Lightroom, but I don't. I think I'm thinking more along the line of actually handling the files where the files are in the folders and stuff like that in a way that's outside of Photoshop and all the other stuff.
Can you all hold your comments on Bridge till my presentation, please?
That's a great segue.
Well, actually, Walt's next.
Oh.
That's okay.
Okay.
Walt, you're
I'm
still
ready.
out there.
Are we all done with questions for Kate?
I think so.
Okay, thank you. That was very interesting.
Yep.
I will share my screen then. And bring up this little file here. Maybe.
All right, I see a slide. I see what looks like a slide.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, hang on a minute. I ended up in
Are you in the middle of your presentation?
yeah, I gotta get it started at the beginning.
Okay.
There we go.
All right.
Now we're starting at the beginning. Photographing, organization. And I'm not gonna talk much about Lightroom or anything because that's not my part. But I've got a method of organizing my files on my hard drive that is, as I think it was Teddy said, free and clear of Lightroom and any other software that you use. The reason I developed this was back in the early 2000s. I was shooting Nikon, and I used the Nikon NX1 software, which was actually developed by Nick Corporation. And it was wonderful. I loved it. And I didn't have any experience with Lightroom until Google bought Nick and shut the Nikon software down. And I moved over to Lightroom. And frankly, for 3 years, I tried to get the results out of Lightroom that I was able to get out of Nick, and was never able to do that. And so I eventually moved away from Lightroom and went to On One Raw. And I get a little closer. It's still not as good as the product that Nick had that Nikon was using back in those days. But when I got to Lightroom, I looked at the catalog function, and I was hopelessly confused by it initially, and eventually decided that my organization was good enough that I didn't really need the catalog function over there. And so I'll show you what I do. This is an example. When I import files, I rename the files, and this is extra Lightroom, the renaming panel, and you can have it when you import off of a hard drive, or off of a flash card or a camera card, or from the camera itself. You can tell it to rename all the files for you, and so I do that in the import process, and I control everything by date. So all the pictures get renamed by date. And I use the format with the first 2 characters being the year, the second 2 characters being the month, and the last 2 characters being the day. And that is a selection that you can make in the Lightroom file name template, file renaming template. Then I put a separator between them, so it makes it just easier to read, and then just use a sequence number on it. And so every picture I've got, and I've done this, I did this with the Nick product, I've done it with Lightroom, and I do it now with One Raw. They all have the same functionality to have your files renamed this way. And that puts them in a very logical order, sequential order. When I'm doing that, I have them each put into a separate, actually I have each photo shoot, each day's photo shoot, or even sometimes sub-days photo shoot, put into a separate folder. And my folders are named very much like Kate's were. They have the year, dash the date, dash the day, and then some description of what that was. You can see here I've got highlighted 2023, June 10th, I was at the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center. And so what that means is that if I ever see a photo of mine in Facebook or in my wallpaper file or Instagram or wherever I find one, I can go directly to where that file is on my hard drive, because it will be under, first of all, I have a subfolder for each year, and then under that year I have all of the subfolders for the different shoots I've had, and then within that subfolder will be all of the pictures with the beginning number of 230610 with sequences.
Walt,
And then after I process, then I put additional 2 subfolders for the outputs. One is for prints. It's a full-size JPEG copy that I use whenever I'm making prints of anything. And then I have a web folder that I just put everything that I process into it with a 1400 on the long side, so that I can use them in the club here or on Facebook or any place else I might want to put them in the web.
Walt, do you
Yes, sir.
use the Lightroom import module?
When I was using Lightroom, I did use the import Lightroom module. You had to with Lightroom because of that catalog function, because Lightroom, as she said, can't track where your pictures are. Because what the catalog file is really, is an index file. And this has got little indexes to point to where you put all this stuff.
Well,
Where it puts it if you let it do it. And so in Lightroom, you need that, and it controls that. And that's why if you move things outside of Lightroom, their index file doesn't get updated and it gets confused. One of the things I like, by the way, about it, the one I'm using now doesn't have an index file. It just reads your hard drive. And so you can put them in there. It knows where they are. You go outside, you move them around, it comes back, it reads the hard drive and shows you what's on the hard drive and where it's at. So you don't have that problem of moving things around.
outside
the discussion.
The dialog boxes that you previously showed on the last couple slides where you did your renaming, right?
Those were actually Lightroom dialog boxes.
But you don't use those anymore.
No, but the software I've got now has a very similar ones with a very
Okay,
similar function.
okay.
It's actually a little easier. It's just on a side panel on this one. So
Oh,
you just
okay,
go there and,
okay.
and punch it in. So, but they all have the ability to program how you want your file renamed, and all of them have that I've used have that capability of using the year, month, date
Okay,
as one of the descriptors of the file.
okay.
So Walt,
Yeah.
suppose you're looking for a file, you want to have it printed for someone. You're
Yes.
looking for a specific photo, but you
Yep,
can't
that happens a lot.
remember the picture. You remember, you know, what it looked like and why you were looking for it, but you can't remember what year you took it.
Well, I've actually had that happen a couple of times, but I can guess kind of what year it is. Like I had a picture of my Patagonia trip that I wanted to somebody wanted to pick a copy of, and I wanted to send it to them. So I thought, well, I can find the Patagonia file certainly, but I got the wrong year. But then I just had to click the year before it, and went, oh, there they are in that year. And so it was pretty easy to find. It wasn't really difficult because I had all of the subfolders with all of the Patagonia shoots in them. And so as long as you can identify where the picture was shot, or you can pretty well find it. Now, I have had a couple of instances where I had a picture that I missed that I thought was somewhere else and it wasn't. And so I had to, when I went and I looked in that folder, it wasn't there, and I had to rethink pretty hard about, okay, now where did I shoot that? Oh, I think it was over here. And went over there and got it. That happened with a short-eared owl, and I've had a couple of different short-eared owl shoots, and so it took me a couple of times to go through the different short-eared owl folders, but it wasn't too hard.
Well, your pictures are gorgeous, and they're more straightforward than, say, mine. That is, you landscapes, places, and so on. You know where you were, what you were taking, but I don't have that type of organization in my pictures, and I couldn't. Well, when I have folders for birds, pictures, folders, I can't, but I name them not by date, not by time, but by topic. Or if they are ones that were for the creative techniques, they're in that file under new work and so on. I know pretty much where things are, but I could never find them if I did it by date, let me tell you.
Yeah, that's an advantage to being pretty much solely a nature photographer, is that I kind of know where I shot different things in different times. So that makes this system work well for me.
Right.
And again, like I meant to say it when I started, I had it on one of the slides. This is just from my way of doing it. It doesn't mean everybody else has to do it, but the idea is maybe it gives you some ideas to think about, and some incentive to go think about how you might be able to come up with a system that suits your needs better. This is an example of just this is actually a picture of my hard drive, and you can see this would happen to be one I was looking for a picture I shot at Ding Darling one year. And actually this is one of the ones I was talking about earlier, that I've been to Ding Darling like 4 or 5 years in a row, and I knew that was a Ding Darling shot that I had, but I had to look through a couple of different years of Ding Darling shots to be able to find that one. So, but you can see how the whole process works. I've got my Lightroom files up here at the top. I've got then each year as a subfolder. Below that, each shoot dated as a subfolder, and then all of the files in that subfolder. You can see the files are all numbered 170215 because they're 2017-0215. So if I see a picture somewhere, if I can find the file name of that picture, I can immediately locate it within my hard drive and therefore within my catalog.
Walt?
Yes.
If you can't remember what year, let's say that Ding Darling was, is there a way you can do a search in here?
Well, you can always do I'm sure I think Windows has it too. You can always do a file search. It's easier for me to I'll just click and open the 2017 and look down through there and see Ding Darling and then look through it. And if that's not it, I'll close it and go back to 2016. If find ding darling, open that and look some. It's just for me, it's an easier way to go about it doing it.
I
And
guess
you can
that's
do
a-
that within the software too. And then when you bring it up, it brings all the thumbnails up, so can actually page through and look at the pictures, which is easy. And I use Apple, and on Apple you can kind of do the same thing. And I think you probably can get thumbnails in Windows too.
Yeah.
I guess that's a good reason to rename your folders too.
Yeah.
Makes
And
it
oh, by the way, not using the Lightroom catalog made it really a lot easier to jump to another software. I didn't have to have the extra complexity of trying to decode where Lightroom put all the pictures and things. Let's talk about the way I store them. I keep everything on an external hard drive. I've got a 6 terabyte hard drive out there. I don't keep anything on my desktop. And the reason is that I go down to the winter and go down to Gulf Shores for the winter, and I don't take my desktop, I take my laptop, but I take my hard drive with me. Usually when I'm traveling, although it's a pretty small hard drive, I don't usually take that hard drive. I do have a smaller version of a hard drive. I don't know if you can see this. This is a little, I think that's a 2 terabyte hard drive that I take on the road. And I use that mainly to back up files while I'm on the road, so that I have copies on, the camera, on my computer, and on there. Because I like to have 3 copies of everything, and then bring them back. But I can also take that, any other pictures that I want to bring along, I can copy on there pretty easily. In addition to my 6 terabyte hard drive, I have a separate hard drive. It's an 8 terabyte hard drive that I use solely for backup. I use Time Machine for that backup. It's an 8 terabyte drive, and the reason I use a bigger drive there is because you can program Time Machine to do iterations of backup. So like my picture file is a little over 3 terabytes. I have almost all 8 terabytes filled up. And what it does is it just deletes the oldest version and puts the newest on every time, but it keeps many years of backups, so that if there's a file that I discovered that I deleted, 2 years ago or a year ago, I can usually go back through all those iterations and find it on there. That's just a picture of the Time Machine panel that comes up, and you can see I've got set to do automatically. It backs up every 7 minutes or an hour, about every hour it looks like. So it keeps a pretty good set of backups there. And I know Windows has a backup utility. I'm not as familiar with it, but I'm sure that you can probably do much the same thing with it. In addition to that, I also have everything backed up in the cloud. The reason for that is, first of all, your hard drive is going to fail. So you need to at least have one backup. It's absolutely necessary, because no matter what you think, your hard drive at some time is going to fail. And so you have to have it backed up. The chances of both hard drives failing at the same time are minuscule, because it's pretty small that a single hard drive is going to fail. So both of them fail at the same time is minuscule. But you could have a disaster. Your house could burn down. A vandal could break in and steal your computer and take your hard drives with it. And so for all of those reasons, I like to have a backup in the cloud. And so I currently use Backblaze because there's no limit to that. I've used CrashPlan and Carbonite. There's a lot of others out there. There's Google Drive. There's iCloud Drive. There's, I can't remember what Windows name is, but I'm sure Microsoft has one.
OneDrive.
But,
OneDrive.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'll just go to the next slide. So, again, I talk about, I like to have it in the cloud. I used to do what Kate did. I had a separate one, and I would take that and store it, like, at the bank for a while, and at my kid's house, and I did this other stuff. And I found that I only went and switched those out, once a month, and then sometimes only once every 2 months, and then sometimes I'd forget, and so I wasn't keeping that backup, the offsite backup, up to date. And the cloud backup is actually more up to date than my hard drive backup on the desk, because the cloud backs up instantaneously every time you change a file or add a file onto your system. And so it is the most up to date. Now, why do I keep a second backup on my desk when I've got the cloud? Well, because when I first, with a little over 3 terabytes, it took me about 6 months to load all that data up to the cloud. Really?
Yeah.
It was 6 months. And so I'm sure coming down to be faster. And some of the companies offer offer for a pretty healthy bit of money to put all your stuff on a hard drive and send it to you. But what I found is that having that extra hard drive on my desk, when I haven't had a failure, and I did have a disk failure a couple of years ago, it took me a day to go buy a new disk and download everything. And I got everything that I needed off of that hard drive, except for a few of the last minute changes that I made. And guess what? I went to the cloud. They downloaded in no time.
Hey, Walt,
Yeah.
at one time, for around $200, Backblaze would load up to 8 terabytes of your stuff on a disk and mail it to you. And if you returned the disk, they'd give you your $200 back. Do they not do that anymore?
They probably do.
Okay.
And so that would be another alternative if you're willing to wait for the mail.
Well,
it wouldn't be bad. It would work.
Well,
In an emergency, it would work.
A 3-day mail delivery for 8 terabytes is probably faster than downloading it.
Faster than downloading it off the cloud, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So I think that's all I talked about here. I've got all that. Yeah, so that's basically the end of my presentation. So any questions?
Thank you. Questions for Walt?
I have questions,
Yeah.
but I know everybody's tired of me talking, so I can go offline.
I enjoy hearing you talk. Ask your question.
I'm never gonna get invited back. That's what I'm afraid of.
No, stop it.
So you have a smaller drive for your travel. I think that's brilliant. That's really all I wanted to say about that. I think I'm going to do that because I think that will work with the Lightroom catalog.
Yes, and it's important to me to have multiple copies while I'm traveling, because that's when I'm probably most at risk of losing something.
Mm-hmm. You said you had your time machine backing up every hour. Can you still work on Lightroom and all the, or whatever software you're using? Can you still work on that if your time machine's running?
Yeah, the time machine does not interrupt any processing that's going on your main hard drive. Okay. Now, what it will, if you've got a file open, it will wait to back that file up until you get that file closed up.
Okay.
So does Time Machine, if you have external drives, does Time Machine back up the external drives, and how does it deal with external drives being plugged in and unplugged at different times?
All it does is it just kind of puts on hold and gives you a notice that it can't back up because this disk drive is missing.
Yeah.
And I've had that happen when I unplug a drive before, so, or something goes wrong, but yeah, it handles it pretty well.
Yeah, you can fine tune time machine to exclude certain drives or certain folders. So that's a lot of management stuff.
Like
but,
all of my system files, I exclude, but I do also time machine some of my personal documents folder on my desktop. Right. So that goes over there as well as all my photos from my external hard drive.
You can also get time machine apps or applets that allow you to specify when like I've got one and I do my backups at night on Wednesdays and Saturdays.
All right. There's a lot of backup rabbit holes to go down.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, the most important thing about backups is make sure you do it.
Yeah, have one.
Have one. Well, have a current one at least, or at least do it.
Yeah, and I strongly recommend multiples because it's your life work in there. You don't want to lose it. It's worth having.
Walt, would you highly recommend Backblaze as a?
I do like Backblaze very much. I had, like I said, those other two, and I've fiddled around with some of the others, and so far Backblaze is my favorite.
Yeah. So if you're looking for a cloud backup, the recommendation is make sure you check out Backblaze.
Okay, I'm wondering, I use Carbonate. Have you ever had any experience with that, Walt?
I did use
Right.
Carbonate for a while, and I went away from them to Backblaze
Okay, why?
because they had a limit on how much you could back up, and I was exceeding that.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Any more questions? Wow, Walt, you got off easy on questions tonight.
Well, I had an easy topic, so it was not.
Well, I don't know about that. Every one of these topics so far has been developed from the schools of hard knocks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to see if I can figure out how to share my screen. Okay, hang on. Let's see. You probably see a real mess of stuff. All right, do you see something that looks pretty
Yep.
clean?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Wow, I can't believe I remembered how to do this. It's been mentioned before, and there's a product called Adobe Bridge that's an Adobe product, and if you get the photography suite, it is included with it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that tonight. What is Adobe Bridge? Some people already know, but this is straight off of, I think, Adobe's marketing site. It is a digital asset management. It's made by Adobe. It's kind of a substitute for a traditional file browser. However, it's specifically tailored for use with image files. It is not an editor. Some of the other products like Lightroom has a lot of editing function in it. Bridge as a standalone does not edit. It's part of the suite. It's tightly integrated, however, with the Adobe editing features. Camera Raw, which some of you may use or may have heard of, is very easily invoked, and it essentially has the functionality of Lightroom. Also, Photoshop is easily invoked from Bridge. It's a matter of just clicking one option or the next in the user interface. It has some catalog or keyword indexing, which I played with once, and one of the reasons why I never used the cataloging function, I don't have the discipline to put in the keywords every time I import photos. The other thing I found is my typing is horrible. I know how to spell, but if you type eagle and you leave a letter out of it, you'll never find that file if it's typed in wrong. So while I really admired a lot of the Lightroom features, I thought, man, I'm not going to be able to do this. And that's the Bridge interface is relatively, and I use that word, intuitive. Some of the other features we'll look at briefly is the filter panel is very useful when sorting your images. Let's see. Did the slide change?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll talk a little bit about how I use Bridge and kind of how I do my workflow. It's a tailored file browser. It's integrated. It has fully functional move, copy, rename, multiple selections, etc. You don't necessarily import anything. You simply move them or copy them. You decide the destination, folders, and file names, okay? So what I traditionally do is I'll go into my hard drive, my whatever I'm using, whether it's on my server or whether it's on a hard drive and I'll create a folder and a destination. I tend to not change the file names, okay? I tend to leave the file names as they are. Once I've copied them in, I can rank them, I can rate them, I can reject them, I can delete them, I can sort them, and I can edit them all within the same user interface. One of the things I do is I copy everything over, okay? I don't call anything until I have at least one copy. And I know that somebody mentioned something about how they make sure they got a copy before they do anything. I'm sure both of us have a story about Well, I thought I copied it all over before I reused the card.
Oh, yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I- there's some, I'll show you the user face. But anyway, I quickly looked through my images. I looked for framing, is the framing right? Is the overall exposure right? And, in general, is the focus look, I have to change, I can't see my own slide here a second.
Hmm.
Yeah, and look for what I call the good ones, okay? And during that process, I assign some stars to the files. A 1-star file might need some very simple adjustments, crop it a little bit differently, maybe change the exposure a little bit. I also will look at the files and rate 2 stars. 2 stars are files that are going to need some extra work, right? Most probably something inside of Photoshop. I might need to clone something out. I might want to do some selective toning. I like topaz filters for some sharpening stuff. If I want to put some layers in and get a little creative, or if I want to do HDR. My last set of stars, those are the ones, it's kind of funny. I get a few more 3 stars than I used to, but I still get a lot of 1s and 2s. Those are my wow photos. They're straight out of the camera, minimal processing required. Basically, all I need to do is convert them over to some JPEG format. The rest of the stuff with no stars gets called out. Okay. So that's kind of my basic workflow. Does anybody have any questions up to this point?
When you say called out, does that mean you delete them or you put them someplace else?
Well, I used to delete them, but I ended up with a pretty nice, pretty large array storage. So now I got enough room to store everything. So I don't necessarily delete them anymore. I used to. And a best practice would be actually, if it's really crap, you ought to throw it away. Okay. And one of the things I quit, I used to try to look at every file as I was importing it and then only import the ones I keep. Well, what I found out was disk space is a lot cheaper than my time is. Did I answer your question?
Yes. By the way, I'm the same way. I used to delete calls and I no longer do because I got so much disk space and it's so cheap now.
Yeah, yeah. Now, there is a small exception to that. Occasionally, once I've got them wherever they go, I store all my stuff directly on my server. Oftentimes, I'll download them to the SSD inside my desktop because I might need to do some focus stacking or other stuff. So I'll create some temporary folders on those, and then I'll save the end result back to the server. And because I have limited space on the SSD in my desktop, I do delete that stuff after a while.
Okay.
So it just depends on what I'm doing. Uh-oh, let's get to it. Uh-oh. Okay, do you see the next slide?
Yep.
Okay, this is the
Oh, wait,
base.
that might be your actual.
No, that's your
Oh.
workflow.
I've hit the wrong button and skipped ahead.
That's your bridge window.
Yeah, I know it is. So is that. This is the first bridge window that I see, okay? And essentially, if you look in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see a little icon that says computer. And the next level of indenture down below that is all my available devices, okay? I've got in this particular case, I have a small 500 gigabyte SSD plugged in. And the next one is one of the network shares I have. I have a USB drive plugged in. There's my Mac hard drive. And the last one is my large folder up on my server. That's another network share, okay? On the left-hand side, you can actually create favorites, okay, that you go to frequently, okay? So you can kind of see I've customized that. Like I have one for Astro files, etc. The filter panel down below, can you see my cursor?
Yes.
Okay, so down below is where you can filter things, and you can filter. There's a ton of ways to filter stuff. I don't use all the flexibility. I'll show you a few of those in a second. Is there any question on that slide?
No.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry. All right, this is drilling down one level below where I was at. Now I'm inside of my photo volume, if you want to think in terms of volumes, and you see all the folders, right? Do you see that one thing that says 2011 and 2012 old stuff?
Mhm.
That's before I saw Walt's presentation on how to name your folders. Okay. And as you can see, it's pretty straightforward. Everything's by year, and thank you, Walt. And drilling down another level, this is now my 2023 folder. And what I do is I try to put as descriptive names on the folders as possible. Okay. I don't have a set of keywords. I just kind of have, here's some individual folder names that help me find stuff. And somebody mentioned before, there's multiple ways, because this is a file folder in the Macintosh operating system, or on my server in this case. I can use any kind of text search I want by looking for Eagles or birthdays or Goose Pond or whatever. So I can find the folders. I mean, I might get multiple hits, but normally it's not too much trouble to drill down. One of the things I have been a little more careful lately is my typing. Does anybody see the big problem in the very first folder?
Yeah.
Amherst.
The Amherst people?
Yeah, it's supposed to be Marsh Madness, okay? But but anyway,
I thought that was a misspelling of Amish.
Well, see, that it could be that, but that's
Amish madness. Yeah.
Amish madness, sure.
Yeah. Well, Rumspringer or whatever they call it.
Yeah.
Is there any? Now the other thing, if you look down the filter panel, different folders were created at different dates. Okay, so if, for instance, I can't do it live, but if I was to click in one of these boxes, only that folder, or in like on 10/9/23, there's 2 folders. The rest of the folders would disappear, and I'd only be looking at 2 folders. Okay.
So Jack, is each one of the folders a single event, or like 2023 Dog Show Karen? If you went to Karen's dog show 4 different times during the year, would you put them all in that one folder? Or
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, or does that folder represent an event in time?
Well, if my cousin was paying me to go follow her around and take pictures, I would make separate folders. Okay. So it really depends. It's like I go down to Panama City Beach numerous times throughout the years. So I'll say September, I'll say May, or I'll say October. Okay. So in some cases, I do create uniquely named subfolders. And that's kind of, to me, that's the beauty of this. It's really flexible to do what you want. Okay.
Can you rename the folders in this panel?
Sure. Yeah. It's I like the name. You right click and you type in whatever you want.
If you type in the name of this folder, it's going to be actually on your hard drive too. So.
Right. You'll actually, because what you're doing, this is a browser on top of the Macintosh operating system. When you change it here, you're actually changing it in the location, and you can go find the new name in your regular, what Mac calls it, a Finder, Finder.
Yep.
Yeah. So there's less chance to mess it up. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, so now I drilled down one level. I took some pictures of bees on the rows of Sharon bush in my backyard, okay? Now, I couldn't capture the whole screen, but if you look down through on the filtering on the left, okay, there's 7 pictures I gave 1 star to, right? And 1 star means, hey, these are pretty good. I just need to crop and edit, etc. Out of 67. Please don't criticize my hit rate. Okay. I also like to add the file type in, like camera raw images, JPEG files, and Photoshop documents. By clicking in any of these boxes, only that file type will appear in the window. So it's an easy way for me to keep track of JPEG files, Photoshop files, and then the actual raw files. And the way the filter panel works is it does what I call an and function. So if you have two things, like if you have stars clicked and Photoshop's clicked, if you don't have any Photoshop files with one star, you won't see anything. One of the things I find of more value is I can put in exposure time and ISO. What I used to do, I would go through and rate things, okay? Say, and especially my wow pictures. And then I'd start clicking filters to figure out which pictures did I like the best, had what exposure time. And as you can imagine, faster shutter speeds give a little faster and a little clearer images. I also did the same thing with ISO. And I haven't done this for a while because my current camera is pretty much ISO it and bury it. But on my old D800, I found out my best quality pictures were at ISO 1600 and below. Okay. So I used it in that manner as well. Questions? All right. So after I've called them, rated them, and done all the fancy stuff with them, here's a picture of a bee that started off with 2 stars. I liked it. It needed a little more work. Okay. And then I basically did a close-in zoom, et cetera, did my processing. And now I have the Photoshop file right here. And then the last thing is the final output, which is the JPEG file. So, and basically what these are is all my 1s, 2s, or my 2s and 3 stars. Okay. Where's my 1 star and there's my 3 stars. Any questions?
When you do your JPEG, does it keep the stars on there?
I don't think so. I don't think so because the original file started off as 2, but I re-rated I was real happy with the way the Photoshop turned out, so it was 3. Now, I think when you go from a Photoshop file to a JPEG, it does retain the stars. I'm pretty sure on the raw file, if you do extensive processing, it does not.
Thank you.
Let's see. As you can tell, all my experience in material are from a Mac user's perspectives. Windows users, as with any kind of software across the spectrum, you might have a little different experience. Are there any questions for me? Wow, y'all are either all asleep or I did a great job.
You did a great job.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
It was well explained, Jack.
Was it? Okay. I have a problem sometimes after you've been using stuff a lot, you leave the little steps out sometimes.
That's good. It's because Bridge is pretty intuitive. So you remember the things. I mean, you just do it without thinking.
Yeah. Well, I'll date myself again. I remember something called DOS, right? Okay. And I remember DIR commands and all that other stuff. So unfortunately, my brain is programmed a certain way. And for me, this file manager perspective, indentured, appropriately named folders, just makes it easier for me.
Well, if you really want to get down the weeds, you could go to the command line interface on your Mac and emulate. You can also have substitute commands. So it's all DOS, looks like all DOS commands. And you can do all those things, especially file naming and moving on Windows and build the script files just to zip. There they go.
Yeah.
That's all Unix stuff with the Mac. Yeah. On the command line.
Yeah.
You could also write down the 1s and 0s that make up the file if you like and put it on
There
paper.
you go.
So,
Yeah, you can.
That's tedious.
Anytime I feel like doing command stuff, I got my Linux server sitting here, which I
There you go.
Which I don't do very often. So,
Hey, Jack, I
Yes.
do have Windows instead of Mac, and I found what I was looking at on your slides, which were very interesting, was very different from what I have in Bridge and Photoshop.
Bridge can change depending on how your screen is set up. Like there are essentials and whatever film strips or whatever like that will look different. So it could be what your bridge is doing isn't quite set up the same as Jack's, because it
That's
should be
right.
pretty close to the same.
Bridge,
Same.
Bridge is like a lot of software. There's a ton of customization you can do to all of it.
Yep.
What I had organized for me works well. I like my favorites. I like my filter. I like my thumbnails. And what I did not show you off to the right-hand side is all the XML data. I did the metadata. I didn't bother showing you. I figured nobody cared about all that.
So does anybody who has a Mac use the native Apple Photos application
Nope.
to manage? Or
No.
okay,
No.
just
Hate-
curious
hate
if
it.
that was
Well,
used by
when you said anybody, you meant anybody in the room, right?
anybody in the room. Yes, I assume there's anybody somewhere who does.
Nope.
I will tell you one thing that I found on the Native Photos app that I liked. If you want to quickly and easily put music to a slideshow, it works really nice for that.
Okay.
That's a hell of a price to pay, though.
What? I'm sorry.
Well, just finding photos on a Mac, just the files themselves is a real pain in the butt.
All
Right.
I think the opposite. I would say the opposite. It's a pain in the neck to find and slow in Windows, in my opinion. So I think it all depends on the user's experience and what they're using.
Right. And so I'm very file oriented, thousands of years. You cannot easily find the actual folder that contains any given picture on a Mac unless you really are willing to go through some dark weeds.
It's tricky. It's
All
tricky.
Yeah.
And you know what makes it even worse is all this auto backup to the damn cloud. I hate that on my phone.
All right.
Anyway,
I mean, the reason, Sharon's got a lot of her stuff just using that app or that setup. And the question is, okay, do we transfer it all over and put it into something that we can share and work with? Because there's going to be a fair bit of work in that, but she's
Right.
hitting the limits of what she can do with the native Apple, and it's going to be work one way or the other. So I want to move to a system that's better. And if somebody said, "Hey, of course you can use photos in native Apple. Here's the tricks to make it work well," and I did not get that response, which was what I was expecting, to be honest.
Yeah.
Well, I've played around with photos, okay, and it just depends on what do you want to do. If you really want to do like crop and a little exposure, and you don't want to do much else other than that, it does that well, okay.
Its problem is it doesn't handle the large files, lots of large files that you start generating when you're working with a modern camera, and so that's where it's kind of choking on figuring out the storage.
Okay, I did not know that. Okay, yeah, I did not. I will say, if you want to share stuff, you really need to move to something probably other than photos, because I know you use a lot. You do a lot of editing with a lot more tools, and I don't think being able to share files back and forth across that it would work very well.
Yep.
Okay.
I use Bridge all the time, and I do it in a way that's very similar to what you do, Jack. So I think one advantage to Bridge is it's free.
Well, I think there is a free version. Is there a free version?
It's always the Bridge. The only version is free for Bridge.
Okay,
The
because
disadvantage is you won't be able to take advantage of Photoshop or other things.
Mine
Also, Bridge, you can also do Adobe Illustrator or Adobe Premiere can be used in Bridge as well.
Yeah, they tend to use that for some of their other products too. Yeah, I like it. I mean, it's pretty. For me, a lot of this, no matter what you use, whether it's Lightroom or file naming or Bridge, you have to really force yourself to have some discipline to come up with a convention that works for you. And we've all heard several of them tonight, and use it. I mean, I think Kate and I have a similar experience. I started taking pictures, and I didn't know what I got these folders and file names that were whatever my camera spit out at me. And I just saved them like that. And as long as I only had 50 pictures to look at, I was fine. But before you know it, 50 turns into 500, turns into 5,000. And if you don't do something early, well, you'll regret it at some point.
Yeah, it's a good habit to name yourself early and get it organized early, and then that makes it a lot easier to edit later on.
Any other, we're a little past the hour and a half point. We can go a little longer if anybody's got anything. Okay, well, thank you again to Kate and Walt. Thank you the rest. Thank you all for dialing in tonight. And we'll come up with another topic. Let's see, we skip. Oh yeah, we'll skip December and do this again, and I think in the 3rd or 4th Thursday in January. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Ralph will somehow figure out how to get me a link for a recorded copy at some point. If
I will
anybody,
get you link.
if anybody would like a copy of any of the presentation materials, reach out to me and I'll get with whoever presented it and try to get you a copy.
Right.
All
And Jack, thanks again for putting this on. It's a fun opportunity.
You know, I think I know something and I go to these and I learn a lot of new stuff. And it's always nice to see people I haven't seen for a while, even if it is on a Zoom screen.
Yeah.
I find it encouraging to find that the things that I find hard, other people find hard also, and that there's a lot of good solutions, but there's no perfect solution. Everything has its trade-offs and everybody has a slightly different system.
Very well said. Thank you, Don.
And we also